Okay, great. So hello everybody, and thank you for joining us today. This edition is rather a special one for the reason that my science work community is celebrating our 10th anniversary. So that's a decade of, accelerating research and fostering not just inclusivity, but also transparency and openness in science. So for those of you joining in for the first time here, I am Sally from My Science Work. We maybe it makes more sense if I give an introduction into the company. My Science Work is a global research management tech provider committed to accelerating research and democratizing science. So on one hand, the company manages this comprehensive database hosting more than 90 million scientific publications and 12 million patents that's populated and accessed by a global scientific community, research community. We advocate open science, so naturally open access, to foster knowledge sharing. And conjointly, My Science Work also offers a suite of advanced data-driven solutions for research institutions, but also for scientific publications and the private sector R&D companies. To put it loosely, these AI-powered solutions capture, preserve, and manage research impact, capture, preserve, and measure research impact, all circling back to the bigger agenda of accelerating research and accelerating innovation. Now, that said, I would like to introduce you to today's webinar and our two special guests. So much of the work that I do here at My Science Work puts me in direct contact with early career researchers, doctoral candidates, and scientists in general. Since early 2020, almost always the conversations, from my perspective, I noticed was that the conversations were redirected into this precariousness of the research industry in 2020 and everything that we are experiencing right now. Notably, as I mentioned before, amongst doctoral candidates, early career researchers, and alarmingly so, female researchers who have now taken up to pressing household management tasks. So this COVID-19 situation is brutal. So while there is a greater cross-collaboration, renewed recognition for open access, accelerated research, I feel there is this belly of the beast, if I may say so, that's not being fully addressed. And that's the goal of this webinar. We aim to explore the role of research and innovation in response to the pandemic, then have a side-by-side analysis of the effects of COVID-19 on the research community. Now, this is a good start for those of you who are joining us live to weigh in on the live chat. Also to be discussed is the precariousness of employment positions for doctoral researchers and early career researchers, expected financial stringency, the prioritization of funding goals, the reallocation of research dollars. And then our experts aim to share strategies to mitigate this long-term impact of research disruptions, in which we also aim to discuss the prioritization of public investment in R&I. That said, please allow me to introduce you to today's panelists. Joining us live from Brussels is Chief Economist Dr. Román, and also live from London is Professor David Bogle. So let's give a proper introduction. Professor David Bogle is the Pro-Vice-Provost of University College London, Doctoral School. He's also the Professor of Chemical Engineering at UCL. As Pro-Vice-Provost at UCL, he leads the strategy for early career research development, so doctoral and postdoctoral. He is the chair of the League of European Research Universities and Doctoral Studies Policy Group, and a member of several advisory boards for early career research development across Europe. So, Professor, thank you very much for accepting our invitation to address us at this webinar.
Pleasure to be here.
Thank you. And now to Dr. Román ARJONA. He is the Chief Economist at the Directorate General for Research and Innovation of the European Commission. He is also the Vice Chair of the OECD's Committee for Science and Technology Policy. He previously served in the Spanish government as Secretary General for Science, Technology and Innovation. And Dr. ARJONA leads a team of economists and policymakers that improve the evidence base in support for STI policies, STI, that's science, technology, and innovation policies. He is active on 3 pillars. So first, national STI reforms with the formulation of policy recommendations for countries within the European semester of economic policy coordination. Second, the analysis of Europe's STI performance against the backdrop of fast changing innovation dynamics. And thirdly, he heads the Horizon Policy Support Facility that provides support to countries to better design, better implement, and evaluate reforms that really enhance the quality of STI investments and policies and systems. So, Dr. ARJONA, thank you very much for joining us today and carving the time to be with us here today.
Thank you very much. A pleasure.
Professor Bogle, I would like to start with you first. How would you describe the academic disposition given the current context?
Well, a lot of uncertainty, of course, but I think what we've seen is a very rapid shift of the way we operate. I mean, everybody's operating differently, but right across Europe, certainly from what I've seen, this very rapid shift of research and teaching, quite remarkable to see how quickly the universities can respond when they really want to. We're known for being rather conservative on the whole, but a much greater, big focus on COVID-related research, lot of money. Some people think maybe a bit too much is going that way, but at the moment we've seen people across the whole disciplinary spectrum really thinking about how we can help in a practical way, but also in a long-term way, not just virology, and respirators and so on, but also the social science of behavioral activities and so on. And then, of course, this very rapid response to working online through teaching. All our teaching is pretty much online these days, but I think we're really talking more about research. We've found that we can do a lot online, but not everything. So we've had to make very special provisions about, the labs have now started opening back up again. So everything, the big effect, particularly on early career researchers, we'll probably come back to this later, the delays in everything, in everything happening. But we found that working online can work really well for some things. Building relationships is difficult, but having meetings like this, seminars, somebody was telling me about a physics seminar that had 1,000 people attending. I mean, you could never do that in the flesh, could you? So I think it's also made us think more about being more collaborative and collegiate. And I think I will come back to that later on. The research enterprise has become very hyper competitive and really quite not very attractive place to be in for many young researchers. And I think this has made us wake up a little bit. And certainly there's a big emphasis on this in the UK to try and see how we can improve this. And indeed, the open science movement is really part of this, being much more transparent about the way we work, what we produce, and how we produce it. And then the last point I think I might make at this point is about the concerns of underrepresented groups has come much more to the fore. It's something that we have been looking at, we have been aware of it, we have been trying to do something about it. But particularly gender is, has been people working on it for a long time, but now particularly around disability and ethnicity and some other protected characteristics. And I think we now have, I think this has been ramped up because it's been shown that those groups have been disadvantaged more than the rest of us. So we just need to get those things our actions in place and work out what to do. Some of the actions have been remarkably unsuccessful. So we have to, just be better at finding out what the best practices in that domain.
Right, sure. And what would you say is the university's role from a research standpoint in response to the pandemic?
So as I mentioned before, lots of research has been targeted. We are better at longer term than short term, it has to be said, but it's been remarkable how certain short time things, the virology, developing new viruses, developing respirators, people have been able to respond remarkably quickly. And that has been working a lot with pharma companies where necessary, and national labs. I think where we have made a mistake in the UK, in my view, where lots of other countries where lots of testing has been done within the national labs and within universities, the government here chose to go a different route and spurned a lot of offers from the university and the public sector. And that's been shown to be a mistake. But it's still, but I see around Europe lots of universities really opening up their laboratories. And now in the UK, the universities are doing this for their own students, even if they're not doing for the rest of society. And I would just like to make one point about the role of the local community, which is actually a broader point. This is about being collaborative and collegiate. You know, the research enterprise is big. We put a lot of money into it. We do need to be better at our interactions with our local communities, and really opening our doors much more, both in the teaching and in the research that we do, so that we can do some things more together, particularly with growing research budgets.
Right. Thank you for that. Dr. ARJONA, can I direct this question to you, because I think it has a kind of it's correlated. Beyond the obvious call for accelerated research, on a broader scale, what role does research and innovation play to ensure sustainable and inclusive recovery from COVID-19?
Thank you very much, Sally. I will profit to share, if I can, a few slides on this, which I think will be quite nice to illustrate this. But let me see, because I'm getting here. Who can share? All panelists. Okay, I think this should work. Otherwise, I'll do it without the slides, because it's fine. I don't need any slides. I don't manage to display them for some reason. But I mean, just to say,
sorry, Dr. ARJONA, just to let you know, in case if you wish to share, you can just click on share screen, and it should say like all panelists. Normally, that should work.
All right, but yes, I mean, I do that on all panelists, but still doesn't allow me to go. Yeah, now it does actually.
Yeah. Perfect.
Here we go.
Great.
Perfect. So you can see them.
Perfect. We see it.
Okay, very good. So actually, I am very grateful for your invitation, Sally, and my science work. I think it's great, to be able to share some time with the community of professional scientists that you are pulling together under the umbrella of my science work, and also, to speak to people that are enthusiastic about science and they come from all over the world. I think that this is really a great moment to do this. Now, there's a lot of activity over the past weeks, months, and even days. A lot of things have happened in response to this changing world and the pandemics, and of course, as well, to deliver on the kind of twin transitions, the digital and green transition. That is what we're working on from the European Union side, and we're devoting all our efforts to this. So everything that I will be telling you about today is actually rather kind of fresh in one way or another. It dates back to only a few weeks from now. And this first slide that you have on the screen is basically our president speaking at the European Parliament on the State of the Union speech. And I think, it just shows basically that Europe is being kind of hit very hard by a number of really big dilemmas in the economic, environmental, and social sphere that are very complex. And I think that the COVID-19 outbreak has only kind of amplified many of those challenges. So what President von der Leyen was trying to convey, at this speech, was basically the need to change the focus of our model of socioeconomic, let's say, goals, from one that is kind of focused on wealth to one that is focused on well-being. And I think that this is a very kind of higher level political statement that is influencing the different actions that are being put in place, from a policy perspective. If I can say it in other words, I was recently listening to a very inspiring speech by Carlota Perez, who's a leading kind of economist on the move, let's say, towards sustainability. And she was saying that in order to save the economy, you have to save the planet. So what we're trying to do from the European point of view, from the EU side, is to fix ourselves ambitious goals. So for example, there has been now a clear goal of decrease of 55% in CO2 emissions. Then we want also to equip ourselves with kind of ambitious policies. So you all have heard about the Green Deal as the agenda, the kind of growth agenda of the EU. There is a new agenda as well on skills, for example. And then we see that all these developments have also to be matched with adequate developments from the research and innovation point of view, because we believe that research and innovation have a fundamental role to play in this change of growth model in Europe. So basically, here I had for you, a slide which contains a few of those elements of those megatrends that lie in the backdrop of our business. So we see, as I was saying, that the world has changed really enormously. It is not the same kind of world right now as it used to be a decade ago. It is not only, let's say, because of the COVID outbreak, but it is also, because some of the issues that we have been witnessing over the past months, including, for example, dating back to the yellow vests movements. I mean, who remembers those now? But they were really in the spotlight only a few months ago. Or issues that are related to the geography of discontent, those places that are lagging behind because they are disconnected from the mainstream. And this is also quite an important debate that is happening out there and that is persisting, despite the kind of COVID outbreak. Or the polarization, of the labor market is also something that we're witnessing, as well as growing kind of inequalities from the regional point of view. No? So my message here is basically, I think that COVID has basically put our well-being and our health systems under a lot of pressure, but also the way that we live and that we work. And this is adding up to the already very big societal challenges that Europe was facing. We're talking about climate change, aging of the population, this kind of growing inequality divides from a social kind of geographical point of view. So this has generated, let's say, a lot of social polarization, and it has even generated many times, like very strong populist movements. And part of the response, to how to tackle this, and this is what's in the last slide that you have there, is basically, to place research and innovation at the center, of the response to this short and medium-term issues, because we believe that there are three elements in here. The first one is that doing science, doing research is absolutely critical to accelerate this green transformation of the European economy and to find solutions in areas such as decarbonization of industry, but also, electric mobility and many others. We need science, to be able, to help us to do that kind of shift. We also need science, to give a due response to these societal challenges that I was mentioning before. And also, of course, to provide the necessary solutions in terms of virology, vaccines, treatments, and diagnosis for the COVID outbreak. And then, of course, science and innovation are also critical to support Europe in gaining the weight that it should have in terms of innovation globally. I mean, we see that there is a very fierce race for kind of technological sovereignty overall. There is a debate around that, and we believe that science and innovation are best placed to deliver on this. But to do it, we need to connect as well, to the citizens in a way that we have not been able to do before. And for example, now we have inside Horizon Europe a number of research and innovation missions, which should be able as well, to put a little bit of glue in that and to really show, that research and innovation are critical drivers and enablers of this kind of change. Back to you, Sally.
Very, very insightful. Thank you very much for that. Professor Bogle, I would like to come to you at this stage because I think you are one of the best people in Europe to address this question too. What is the impact of COVID-19 on early career researchers?
I think you're muted, David.
Yes,
Sorry,
Professor.
thanks very much. Sorry,
Yeah.
thanks very much. Sorry. Big question. As I was saying before, universities have been quite responsive and have stood up pretty well to this big challenge. But I think it has been more of a problem for early career researchers, a part of our community. And so I think the first one, is the biggest problem, is about careers. We are preparing our researchers to be, innovators in society, not just for academic careers. In fact, it's a very small minority that will go into academic careers. But there's no doubt that many universities have curtailed their hiring. So even that particular part is problematic. And a lot of companies have also curtailed hiring. There's a lot of concerns about the short-term economic effects on lots of companies, which of course inevitably has made many of the companies, small and large, because we're training our researchers to be, well, I've got a nice phrase that we use in Liru: creative, critical, autonomous, intellectual risk takers. And I think everybody wants people like that, everybody at the innovation end of society. So I think there is a real problem in the short to medium term for researchers. I think this will come out as we come out the other side, and we will maybe talk about that later on, that, everybody wants innovation intensive economies nowadays, particularly in the developed world, but pretty well everywhere. So we do want these well-trained, creative, critical, autonomous, intellectual risk takers to really drive innovation in our society. But that doesn't help the short-term people who are coming to the end of their contracts, end of their PhDs, or whatever. So I think that is pretty critical, and is also affecting the short-term nature of the early career researcher experience, which is something we're trying to look at in the UK and indeed across Europe in general, being very exacerbated by reduction in core funding and much greater project-based funding, which inevitably means shorter term things. So it needs people to be more flexible about where they're going and how they develop the skills, not just the research, but the skills, the broader skills, the research skills, but the broader skills that they undoubtedly do as researchers. So sorry, did you want to pick something? No, okay.
Yes, because just earlier you mentioned something very very critical about underrepresented minorities. Are there some more than others being affected?
Yes, there certainly are. And we have evidence of that, and we're trying to do our best to alleviate that. But that has always been a problem, and it's just been made worse. I wouldn't have said that I had a solution to that. Well, we have actually. We've got a plan, but it's a plan, and we're trying to put some things into action. And I think a lot of the actions that have been taken over the past decades or so have not been very effective. I look at the numbers in engineering, for example, female numbers in engineering have been absolutely flat for 10 years. In spite of lots of activity to try and increase the number of women in engineering. So there's a lot of anxiety, a lot of desire to do something, but it's a difficult nut to crack. I can come back in a year or two and tell you we've got an action plan within UCL at the moment, and I can tell you more about some of the things that worked and some of the things that didn't. But at the moment, I'm not so sure. We have a lot of people saying this is a problem, but I haven't seen enough what we should be doing about it. So we're trying some things out. So let me tell you a bit more about the early career researchers. Of course, there have been lots of delays on their work, and certainly within UCL, we've allowed lots of extensions. We gave stipend extensions to everybody whose funder would not give them more money, and that really, I think, made things a lot better for a lot of people, not perhaps everyone. Has it? Well, maybe something I'll come back to a bit later. No, maybe now's the time to. No. I'll come back to it later, because I think the structure of finance of universities has come under question now. We have many international students, for example, and a lot of the international student money is actually what's underpinning the research funding within the system in the UK and some other countries. So I think there's there's been some really high level thinking about whether we need to change the financial structure. But in fact, the number of international students has broadly held up. So in spite of the big concerns, I'm not sure that's entirely true across the country, but it's very important in the UK for financial. It's less important around Europe for financial terms, but it's very important in terms of the globalization and the internationalization of higher education. Of course, everybody's been locked out of their laboratories for many months. But as I was saying before, it has really made us change the way we work, and I think that going forward is something that we will really see a change in the way that we do research and work, be that in the humanities or in the hard sciences. Of course, the hard sciences have to spend their time in the lab, but I think the biggest change it will have will be we can change the way we configure the space in our universities. Lots of laboratory spaces and office spaces not really being used quite as effectively as they might be, but not enough social space. Certainly in my university, I've seen that reduce over the time that I've been there. And yet what we need is more space for collaborating, working together, agile working in and out, so that, you know, the time when you have to have your own desk, you have to have your own corner of the laboratory, you have to have your own carrel in the library, is maybe that's going to change, and we have to reconfigure even some of our very old and ancient campuses, which that will be difficult, but I'm sure that's doable. And then this isolation element and hyper competitivity is something that has also affected our early career researchers quite extensively. They've been feeling, needing to produce the results in spite of not able to get into the laboratory or the library or talk to their subjects that they need to interview. And a lot of the funders are trying to send out the message of, don't worry, it'll be okay. And certainly as universities, we've been doing that, you know, adjusting expectations where we can. But it is inevitably very concerning. Somebody wants to do their best. They're very passionate about their subject. They really want to make the contribution that they have in mind, and that has been curtailed. And as I say, we've been trying to alleviate that as best we can by funding extensions, time extensions, better sort of networking activities to try and bring research students and the early career researchers in general together. But I think going forward, as I've mentioned just before, this is to me the big issue, that we really have to not be so focused on the very short term, you must have 3 papers to do this, that, or the other. We have to be thinking about what are the ideas, how can we really demonstrate those ideas, and how can we take them out and make an effective contribution on the basis of those ideas, and get away from this huge concentration on numbers of papers, numbers of grants, numbers of whatever else it might be. And I like to think that the virus has made us feel a bit more empathetic and a bit more collegiate about these things, and that we can really take this forward. But there's a lot of resistance to that amongst more senior scientists, who I think are quite comfortable in the way that they work now, and it's not acceptable in my view.
Thank you, Professor. Research and innovation are an essential part of the coordinated EU response to public health threats of COVID-19. I'm quoting the European Commission publication titled "The Role of Research and Innovation in Support of Europe's Recovery from the COVID-19 Crisis." So this speaks of channeling public and private investments and aligning funding and investment streams to underpin the recovery. How does the recovery package take into account SMEs, notably the startups? Please, Dr. Arna.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sally. I think that one good kind of point to start from is actually to highlight that indeed, Europe is very well positioned in some of these areas which are critical to deliver, let's say, on the green and the digital transitions. So, for example, if we look at scientific publications in the area, top cited scientific publications actually in the areas of climate change or the bioeconomy, then we see that actually Europe is leading the research that is kind of happening in this area if we look at global market shares. So, for example, 25% of the top cited publications in the area of climate are European, while we have only China following with 21% and the United States following with 19%. The same happens if we look at the bioeconomy top cited publications. There we have 27% coming from the EU, while only 19% are from the US and 18% are from China. And if we look at patent applications, a similar kind of phenomenon is happening, where Europe is actually having 25 for around 1/4 of the global market share, and the US and China are actually behind. So I think that this kind of shows that Europe is a science powerhouse, and in some disciplines it is actually very well positioned to ride, let's say, this new wave of opportunities that are going to emerge from the green and the digital transitions in areas such as those ones, climate change or the bioeconomy. And I think that this is a very good sign, particularly if this is matched with the kind of hints that were being given by David before, where he was also saying that he was seeing a big focus on COVID, for example, across the disciplinary spectrum. So I think that if we manage, to set this refocusing of the activity right to deliver, on everything that is necessary, in order to position science as a key deliverable, as a key deliverer on the COVID solutions, and we also managed to ride the wave well in relation to those this positioning of Europe's science in relation to the societal challenges that are ahead of us, then I think that we are really on the right path. And just to say also on the 21st of July, there was an agreement by European leaders on a deal for the recovery plan and the European long-term budget for the period 2021 to 27. And here I think that by the end of 2020, the EU will actually be investing about 1 billion into research and innovation to tackle the COVID-19 and its consequences. Up already to September of this year, the EU has been investing about 460 million from Horizon 2020, which, as you know, is the European Research and Innovation Program, in more than 100 projects that are targeting the pandemic. And in addition, there are like 550 projects that have been funded by Horizon and the 7th Framework Program that are also contributing to advancing scientific knowledge or technologies in the area of the COVID response. So I think that there is, let's say, a wide investment that is being made, to find the right place for science as a kind of a contributor to the response to COVID. And inside this long-term budget of the EU and the recovery package, there is a part which is there is a mechanism which is labeled Recovery and Resilience Facility, which has a big kind of pot of money of around 672 billion euros, which is devoted, let's say, to support countries to do the right reforms and investments in many areas. And if you look at the areas which are underpinning this facility, then we see, for example, clean technologies and renewables, which play a very prominent role. Also, energy efficiency of buildings, sustainable transport, digitalization of the public administration, the data cloud. So these are all areas in which, let's say, Europe is strong or has a possibility, to exploit its potential in terms of the, let's say, the delivery of its science and innovation capacity. So I think that this is also very good news for Europe. And in relation to your questions about, let's say, SMEs, I think that here, we have also an opportunity ahead, because the dynamics of innovation. The DNA of innovation processes has changed enormously over the past decade. So we have moved beyond what we could expect on this. And we see that, for example, there is a high degree of complexity behind the innovations that are now being put into the market. These innovations tend to happen more and more at the convergence of different scientific disciplines and of different technologies. So it is no longer possible, let's say, to trace back a single innovation to a single technology development or a single scientific area. And I think that that is really, a new element. Also, innovations are more and more deep tech oriented. So they are more and more drawing on cutting edge scientific developments. And I think that this is also, if we combine it with the kind of concentration that we're seeing in innovation developments over the past years, with a lot happening around the kind of GAFA style of firms, so Google, Alphabet, Facebook, etc., then we see that basically what is happening is that we have a lot of innovation concentrated in a number of top performing firms and not diffusing properly to the big fat tail that is behind. This is something that has to be addressed, let's say, from a research and innovation policy point of view. So I think that we need to, at least through European mechanisms, but also at the member state level, to support this innovation diffusion, to support the emergence of breakthrough technologies, and to do this in a much more kind of consistent way, so that we can profit from all these kind of opportunities that are emerging from the green and the digital transition. So yes, there is really a good moment, let's say, to look at these opportunities in a positive way. Back to you, Sally.
Thank you. That's very insightful. Coming to you, Professor, to address the future. The United Kingdom, taking the case of United Kingdom, they promised a 15% increase in public funding for research and development in the next fiscal year. That's 2.4% of their GDP. In the face of a likely recession, highly likely recession, what is your take on the future of the research industry?
Okay, well, I'll broaden out a bit from that, but I would say one thing about the situation in the UK in the moment is uncertainty. Everything is uncertain. We have the uncertainty of the pandemic. We have the uncertainty of what's going to happen about budgets and any potential recession coming onwards as well. We have the Brexit uncertainty. We have some change in leadership of the main funding agency as well. Although I think that's been a good thing. The UKRI, this UKRI thing, where the new chief executive is very keen on this whole research culture issue. But so they have promised a very significant uplift in money over the next few years for research and development. You ask whether it will come. Well, uncertainty is the name of the game. I've even seen just recently a little bit of questioning about whether that will come. I think we will get an uplift. I suspect we won't get the uplift that we would like to have. And some of it, as always, will be repackaged money rather than necessarily new money. So I'm confident that, the government does believe that, as Román was saying, that science and science in the biggest sense, Wissenschaft, is one of the drivers of prosperity. So they really do want to grow this, not only in the public sector, but also in the private sector as well. So if we're going to see, so there are some structural tax and ways that need to be supported if the private sector is really going to grow, because I think that's just important. I mean, to get up to 2.4 from 1.7 is a huge thing to go, and it can't all be done in the public sector. But I do believe it will rise, because we believe this is very important, and we all think, but it needs to be supported by society, this growth in investment in research and development. So I think there's a few things that need to go with that we need to change a bit about, that we need to be working more closely with society and not be quite such the ivory towers that we you know, we're better than we used to be, but we need to do much more around co-creation of research, really thinking much more about the potential impact of the work that that our researchers are doing. It's not all going to make a huge impact, but I believe everybody needs to think about the impact of the work that the work they're doing and what it might have. In fact, a few years ago, we brought in every thesis at UCL has to have a one-page statement about the impact and the significance of the work, because I felt that, you know, that wasn't being brought out enough in the theses. But that means that we also need to be slightly changing the way we train. We train people to be really good at research, but not perhaps good enough at what Román was talking about innovation. How do we take these ideas out into society and really make things happen with them? We do a bit of it, but I don't believe we do enough of that for either our doctoral or all our early career researchers. And I think that's really going to be crucial. If the money is going to go up, we have to show that it's really making a difference. So just a few other words about sort of finance then. It was very interesting. I was on a similar sort of call in the United States, well, remotely in the United States a few weeks ago. And they were saying that post the 2008 recession in the US, the private universities came out of it much more quickly than the public universities. That was not true in Europe, partly because we don't, you know, our private universities in Europe don't really do very much research, and they're very special animals, the big private universities in the United States. So I think we've shown that the universities can turn very quickly and be very responsive when they need to be, but we have to maintain this long-term view, because that's what we're good at, and that's really our key role for education, but also this sort of longer term research perspective, which the private sector, the companies can't do. And that's why most of the money comes from the public sector at the moment. I've mentioned a bit about the problems, this rise in money. I mean, I said before, this problem, the structural problem about the fact that overseas student fees are sort of underpinning our research activity. And I think there needs to be thought about, and there is thought about this, about how that might change so that we can fully recover the costs of research. We do that quite well in the UK. I won't go into the details, but many other countries also wish to grow and develop their research capabilities and research training capabilities for early career researchers. But it would be difficult for them to do it when you are so reliant on the state money without having commensurate rise in state funding for it. And you know, there's a question about whether all the member states are willing to do that. The Commission is willing to, you know, there's central money, but that's a small part of the overall budget of research and development across the across Europe, across the world, in fact. And then just to reinforce this point about, you know, if we are really going to see this big rise, we really need to be training our researchers to be getting out there much more in society, making those links, explaining what they're doing, co-creating research with local communities and national communities and international communities as well, and really growing and developing their innovation skills. I'm not going to try and define the difference between research and innovation, but it seems to me innovation to me is not just about doing the research, having the idea, demonstrating it beyond reasonable doubt, but it needs to how we can take those ideas forward and make the most of the investment in the ideas that are going to fly. Because as I say, not all are going to fly. There might be medium-term ideas that are going to, there might be very long-term ideas that will take time to come out, and all of these are valuable. So that means that the nations, well, all research funders really have to think carefully about the balance between truly fundamental research and what we might call mission-oriented research, and then more innovative research, not innovative, more innovation type work, how you're taking this out. And that will continue to be a big debate in all countries about what the balance of those should be. And that probably may well depend between countries. And it will also, it's at the end of the day, quite a political question, rather than, because the scientists will always, we believe that fundamental research underpins all of this, and that must be retained at a very significant level. But the precise balance between, let's say, fundamentals and mission oriented is always up for debate.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you for that fantastic explanation. So, sorry, but at this stage we are running out of time. So I would like to take this opportunity to address some questions that we've been receiving from our participants. And again, this is a reminder for those of you joining us live to, send us your questions either on the chat on the live webinar or on the YouTube live streaming comment section. So I have a couple of questions here, and I will try to save some time and reformulate it in a way that's a little bit more structured. Money, manpower, and materials are being directed to COVID-related research at this stage. And please, Dr. ARJONA, please feel free to hop into the conversation. What are some solutions to really explore? What are some solutions to explore for researchers conducting fieldwork, data collection, and other non-COVID related research to thrive in their respective research?
Okay, well, there are some things that you really just have to get out there and do, but I think our universities and our researchers are being much more responsive about and imaginative about the way we can undertake some of the work. Interviewing people has always felt to be very much important to be face-to-face. I've seen a lot more. I think some needs to be still done that way, but there are some things that can be done online. I think when there are key fieldwork activities, I think what is needed is, I mean, that can't, if you really have to take fieldwork, geographical fieldwork or clinical fieldwork or whatever it might be, it has to be done. What we have to do is to be more flexible about the timescales and the timescales of the projects, because the lockdown really prevented people for about 4 months, but it knocked over, and we tried to get the fieldwork things back in as early as possible, and the clinical activities back online as early as possible. So the answer to the question is, there isn't a solution to the ones that really must be, except to reschedule and try and reorganize so that you can do the things, the data processing, the understanding, the writings and so on under lockdown, and that's what certainly we encouraged all of our researchers to do, so that the field work, when things become more relaxed, then it's possible, and try and get those ones prioritized as early as possible. There isn't a more straightforward answer than that, I don't think.
Great, thank you very much. Would you like to weigh in on this, Dr. ARJONA?
Yes, thank you very much. No, I think that David, has a deep knowledge of this area, and his answers were really very, very topical, and I think that he really put the finger where it should be. I think that from my side, I would just add that we need as well to adjust the way that kind of public policy for research and innovation is being done in order to make it more attuned to the time. So just to give you an example, the European Research Area Agenda, which is an agenda that we have put in place for the last kind of 20 years at the European Union. Well, I mean, there are some successes, of what we have made. For example, it has led to the creation of a very large number of research infrastructures with very big investments behind that makes the life of everybody across all the researchers across the European Union, much more easy. There has been as well a lot of investments, on joint programs between different member states. There has been, an effort to make researchers' careers better. There has been a charter and a call for researchers. A lot of work being done as well on the European Open Science Cloud, but still the landscape, as I was telling you in the beginning of my talk, has changed. I mean, we have all these kind of really hard-hitting challenges. We have the COVID outbreak out there, and I think that we need to improve the way that we are also, having our agenda set up in order to deliver on what are the researchers' needs. So, for example, we see the 3% investment target, which is something that everybody is very familiar with. That was a European Union target fixed in year 2002. We are still far away from it. We're at, I think, at 2.18 at this moment, with respect to the 3%. So I think that there is still, considerable moment for our heads of state and government, to take a little bit, the reins on this, and to be able to kind of reaffirm somehow, these high-level targets, so that Europe does not lag behind as much as it does on private investment, that the public investment on research does not stagnate, because without that, we cannot put the glue in the system. These infrastructures, these joint programs, this emphasis on researchers' careers has to be accompanied by the right level of investment, but also by ambitious policy reforms to kind of reduce significant divides in performance across the EU, but also to help to improve, to translate the research and innovation results to the economy, as David was saying before, to support the kind of twin transitions and the recovery and progress. For example, on gender equality, just to pick another example in relation also to your question before to David, Sally, has been relatively slow. So if we look around, we see that 24% of top positions in higher education sector are occupied by women. I think that we are still also very far from where we should be in that, and as well, as the involvement of citizens and society in the definition of public policy for research. So we have put together all of this under a new frame, and on the 30th of September, we have adopted a new kind of policy agenda for the European research area at EU level that now we want to discuss with member states and with all stakeholders, where careers of researchers, researchers' mobility and the attraction of talent, better cooperation between academia and industry, having the essentials such as research infrastructures, working properly and in a cohesive and well kind of ingrained fashion. These are all elements that are part of this new agenda. So I just wanted to say, public policy also needs to adjust to this reality, not just let's say the research institutions, as David was mentioning before, but also the overall way that we are approaching these problems at the higher political level has also, to adapt to the changing times.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I think we have time to take in one last question, and I'm again trying to reformulate this in a way that I address all this, but in a better structured way. How can academia be better prepared for future pandemics, but also taking into consideration that teaching and research in, for example, agronomy, particularly the plant breeding, requires direct contact with students? Could you perhaps share some experiences in teaching practicals to students, but also how could we be more prepared for future disruptions, research disruptions?
Okay, I'll try and answer that one. Let me start with the practicals. I haven't been involved, but I know that certainly in engineering, where I at UCL, and most of what I hear is they are continuing, but they are continuing in a socially distanced way, so that quite a lot of our labs, our teaching labs, are not used all the time. So we have to be much more creative about the way we use them, so that we get rotas of students going in. The problem with that is it takes quite a lot more staff time, and that's there's obviously nothing you can't solve without lots of money. So I'm going to talk about a couple of other things. The future of the pandemic, beyond future pandemics. Sorry, I mean, a colleague of mine at the Karolinska said that we have one of these about every 50 years, but it just happens that the last one was 100 years ago, so we've sort of forgotten. But even still, they may happen more frequently than that in the future. And I think we have to, one thing we need to do is reconfigure the space. As I've mentioned that before, there will be much more online working anyway. I think maybe more people working from home, but we have to be sympathetic to that. Not everybody can live in comfortable, nice houses. There is a bit of a housing crisis as well. So, particularly for early career researchers whose salaries are not that as good as I think they should be personally. So I think reconfiguring the space is really rather important, so that we can be more responsive and enabled socially distanced working much more easily going forwards. And then if you need to respond quickly, it's easier to reorganize the spaces that we're in. And the other then is the fact that, well, as I said much earlier on, we were able to provide stipend extensions for all of our students who were not funded, or not, this funder was unable to extend. So we just have to be more flexible about timing and funding. And that does mean universities having a little bit more own resources to be able to support the flexibility that's necessary. Now that's going to be difficult, certainly in the UK system, where we get very little core money for the research activity. It's all on a project, almost entirely on a project base. There is some, but and I've seen around Europe the greater, much greater move towards project-based funding, particularly from third parties, not just from the universities, but from obviously from agencies, but also from companies and so on and so forth, and a reduction in the core funding. And I do think that needs to be reconsidered in some way, because we are going to need more flexibility to be able to be responsive to crises going forward. And we don't want to do that on the back of fees from students from the rest of the world.
From a policy standpoint, Dr. ARJONA, do you have something to add for greater preparedness?
Well, I think that we need basically somehow to look at a few key issues, such as I was trying to say before, improving the kind of researchers' careers overall, but also, the flow through of research and innovation talents, so that this, get as well, to the economy in the best possible ways, and also that we kind of access or improve the access of the countries that are kind of lagging behind in terms of research and innovation developments to the research and innovation talent pool that is there across Europe. So we are working on a number of areas to help make this switch. For example, we have identified in this European research area framework that I was mentioning before, the need to have some kind of European competence framework for research careers, where we have like kind of comparable and interoperable framework of research careers, a taxonomy perhaps, of researchers' skills, so that we kind of are able to better identify, as well, what are the needs in terms of skills and how we can monitor the evolution of those in terms of labor market, career skills, mobility in general. I think that that's an area where I would say, that we need to dig a little bit deeper. Also, we have had this charter and code of researchers for a long time. I think we need to see how to revamp that charter and code and how to best connect it to these emerging new realities. And also, I think that one key element that we need to keep in mind is how to be able to incentivize kind of mobility schemes between industry and academia, which is something that is happening, on a relatively, let's say, ad hoc even basis, or a non-comparable basis many times, between the different member states. I think there is a lot that can be learned from experiences of very successful member states, that have put this type of mobility schemes in place. Also, as I was saying, targeted kind of mobility measures to attract talents from those countries that lag behind and to link them better, into those research and innovation ecosystems which are forward. I think that these are, in my view, also a few elements from more, a policy perspective that could be interesting to fit into this framework.
Thank you, Dr. Román ARJONA and Professor David Bogle.
Can I just make one very last comment?
Please.
Somebody asking what the future for science and research is. The future is very, very positive, I think, because all countries, as we recognize, and the evidence is there that investment and good researchers and investment in research and innovation is really good for prosperity and growing the prosperity of countries. So I think the outlook is good.
Yes, if I may add something small on this, because I think it totally links to what Professor Bogle was saying. We have made recently a study that shows that basically 2/3 of economic growth over a period of a decade from 2006 to 2016 can be traced back to research and innovation in the kind of broader sense. I mean, talking about the intangible assets. And I think that it is undeniable that research and innovation have a key role to play. And it is also undeniable that research has never been, so much, in the public space as it is nowadays, due to the pandemics. And I think, for example, this is really a good opportunity to write on from our side as well. I mean, there is a lot of public debates on this, television shows and media giving a lot of space to science. And I think that this is really, for example, a very positive thing that is happening, despite the fact that it's happening because of the pandemic. But I think we should really make the most of that.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. ARJONA and Professor Bogle for joining us live today. I think we can take away some quality insights to take away from this conversation. So for those of you joining in, you can watch the replay of the webinar on My Science Work YouTube page, or simply join us on our social media channels where we will share the link to the replay. Thank you very much once again for joining us live, and thank you very much for the panelists for presenting their insights today. And that is a wrap. And I wish you all a very healthy, safe week, month. Some of us are in lockdown for a month over here in Paris, but stay safe and stay healthy.
Thank you.
Thank you. Same to you.
Thank you.